Hey, it's Patrick from J&P Cycles, and I'm gonna show you how to put a single fire ignition on your Harley Davidson. Now this installation is basically gonna be the same for almost any nose cone style single fire ignition. Now what that means is this is gonna be relevant to nose cone shovel heads, basically from 70, 71 up to 84, all Evo big twins, and Sportster, all Evo Sportsters up to 03. Now, some of the twin cams and some of the late model Sportsters actually did have single fire ignitions on them, but most of the bikes I just mentioned in those year ranges don't have single fire ignitions. Now, you might ask, what is a single fire ignition and why do I want that? Well, the basics is a single fire ignition only fires on the compression stroke of your motor. While you may have thought that's happening on your Harley right now, it's actually not. You have a dual fire ignition, meaning even though the one cylinder is on compression stroke, getting ready to light that mixture in there to go bang, to push that piston down, the other one is not on compression stroke, but it is still having a spark sent to it. Now that can do things like lead to an erratic idle, cause backfires, things like that. It's just not a very efficient system. The specific system we're using today is the Daytona Twin-Tech 1005. And not only is it a single fire system, it will actually run dual fire, but it has a bunch of other options. One of the big features is selectable advanced curves, meaning it has a bunch of built-in different advanced curves to it. Harley engines tend to really like advanced, especially ones that have been modified with cams like our bike today. Another thing is it will allow us to adjust our rev limiter. I'm not saying you should go put your rev limiter at 9,000 RPM, peace be unto your motor. If you do that, but the stock limiter on this bike is about 5,800, so we're gonna stretch it up into about 6,200 and let this built motor breathe a little more. Now, it's worth noting if you are going to put a single fire ignition on your bike, it needs a single fire coil. Dual fire coil is just one plain coil in there with two pegs. On the single fire coils, there's three pegs, meaning there's actually two little coils in there that work independently of each other. Another nice thing about our unit is its billet design. Heat basically is the #1 killer of ignition systems, and the stock systems basically are a little plastic box that's glued to a metal plate. A lot of times that plate tends to warp and pop those little boxes. Ours is a billet enclosure with the ignition potted in the back, allowing it to move around a little bit, and also that billet enclosure is way less likely to warp. Now, I'm not saying that putting this ignition on your bike is going to fix all your tuning problems. You definitely need to have your carburetor set up in a good state of tune to take full advantage. Now you may ask, hey, if I put this on my bike, am I going to gain horsepower? Now in a vacuum, no, the ignition's not going to add any horsepower to your bike directly. But indirectly, yes, if you have components on the bike like cams or a little more compression, stuff like that, this is going to affect your horsepower. It's gonna affect how clean the bike runs. Like I mentioned before, a little cleaner idle, less likely to backfire. And back to those advanced curves again, the more advanced we can put in this motor with the cams and the compression we have in here, the more horsepower the bike is going to make. And this unit is actually also capable of having custom curves built to it. We're not gonna get into that today, just another feature. So the bike we're installing this on today is a 2001 Sportster, the nose cone style big twins. This is basically gonna be the same. We have to get inside here. If this cover has never been taken off, it's gonna look a little bit different. The stock ignition on this has actually been replaced. That's why the points cover is turned sideways and we have two screws here. Generally this would be this way and there'd be two little rivets. So if you have a completely stock engine, you have to drill those rivets out to get this cover off. There's gonna be this little plate in there too, which we're gonna take out. And this exposes our stock ignition. And then we're gonna take a flat bladed screwdriver and these little standoff screws here, we're gonna pull them out. And then we're gonna come down here to the wire that's coming out of the cam case. There's a plug down here that I'm gonna unplug. But to pull it through the cam cover, we're gonna cut this wire. So now all we have to do is reach in here and grab this and feed the cord through the cam cover. So now we're gonna take our new wiring harness that's attached to our ignition. We're gonna feed it back through that hole in the cam cover, and then we're gonna want the ignition on the Sportster to end up sideways like this, with the wire pointing right down into the hole and our little slots lining up with our threads for our standoffs. If you have a big twin, this will more than likely be pointing straight up and down like this. Now, where we take these wires kind of depends on your bike. You need to get them to where your coil is and where your key switch is. Generally, those are pretty close to each other. So when we go to put this in there, you'll see these two little sensors, these two little slots. Those are the Hall effect sensors. They need to go around this cup in here. They slide over the top of the cup. So when you put that ignition in there, just make sure it goes in there nice and easy. Also, check the cup out, but just make sure there's no damage to it. Putting these little standoffs in here, we don't want to make them tight right now. You still want to be able to move the ignition. I'm gonna run these back down the frame, up kind of behind the seat post and the battery, down the other side of the bike on the frame to where our coil is. We have a side mounted coil on this bike. We're gonna throw a couple zip ties on this frame rail to keep this wire from floating around. There's 5 wires on this. We are actually gonna only be using 3 of them today. The pink one is gonna go to the front side of our coil. The blue one is gonna go to the rear side of our coil, our rear cylinder. The white one with the black stripe will go in the middle. Now the 2 we're not using, this purple with the white stripe, if you're still using your VOES on your bike, this goes to your VOES. And if you have a tack, the brown wire is gonna be your tack input. We don't have either one of these things, so we're just gonna cap these off. Okay, so now we're to the coil side. We're gonna take our old coil off. I'm gonna mount our new coil in the same spot. We're not gonna use any of the wires going to the coil. So again, you can clip them off, cap them, get rid of them. That's up to you. Then we're going to wire our pink wire to the front cylinder, our blue wire to the rear cylinder, and our white wire to the center post on our new coil. I highly recommend using little post adapters. Don't just wrap bare wire around the new post on the coil. Crimp something on there so you have a nice end to your wire. So before we put our fitting on the end of our white and black wire here, we need to get a 12-volt switched wire and put with this in the same fitting before we put it on the post. Your coil is probably somewhere by your ignition, which is the perfect place to get a 12-volt switched wire. I'm gonna add it to this, put it on the post. Voila, the coil side is wired. So before we set our ignition in the nose cone at top dead center, we need to actually physically set the motor at top dead center or put it statically at top dead center. And there's a couple ways to do that. The first way is to pull the spark plugs out. We'll roll the motor over using the rear wheel, put it in high gear. And then when you feel air coming out of this front cylinder, that means it's coming up on compression stroke. This is the cylinder we're worried about, is the front one. We need to feel that air. And you'll feel it pushing out. Push your thumb over it if you can. Get somebody to help you roll the rear wheel. I like to use a little piece of solder in case it breaks off in there. And when that piston's all the way at the top on compression stroke, that's where we stop. That's top dead center. So we're going up. It's going up. Right there, started to go back down. Here's the other way to check top dead center. We're gonna pull this plug out of the crankcase here. You'll need a 3/8 Allen. Okay, so as we turn this wheel, you're gonna see a series of dots. Right after those dots is gonna be the mark we're looking for. Right there is exactly where we want it. Okay, so now if you unhooked your battery, you need to hook it back up. We're gonna turn the key on to power up the bike. We need this little light that says status. It's a red light, and it shouldn't light up right away. You need to move it a little bit. And when it lights up, you need to start turning it clockwise real slow. And as soon as it goes out while you're turning it clockwise, stop right there, tighten your 2 standoff screws up, because now we have everything set at top dead center. We need to set our ignition up. They all have 9 options on them. The first one is the mode select. And you'll set this mode depending on how your motor is built, whether it's a street motor or a little hot rod or a race motor. Ours, we're gonna set a little bit on the aggressive side. I'm gonna set it 7. So basically you just click this around and there's an arrow on one end, and we get to 7, we'll stop. The second dial is your advance slope, and that's how aggressive you want the advance to come in. The more of a built motor you have, the more aggressive you can get with your timing. These last 2 are the Rev Limiter. This comes stock at 5,700. Again, unless you have a really built motor, you're probably not gonna rev a lot past that. This is a motor with a big bore and cams. So I'm gonna set this at 6,200 because that motor will pull through there. If you have a stock motor, it's probably not gonna pull much past 5,700 anyway. For our scenario here, we are gonna raise the Rev Limiter a little bit. This may take you a few tries to land on the curves and the modes that work best for you. But the one thing you really need to listen for is pinging. If it's making like a clicking noise, especially when you're in a higher gear, you roll into the bike at a little bit lower RPM, put some load on the motor, you're gonna hear that click, 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 click. That's pinging, or what's called pre-detonation. That's bad, and that's an indicator that you need to back off one of these advanced slopes and put something milder in the ignition. So ours is all set. Now we're gonna put our timing plug back in, we're gonna throw our spark plugs back in and go for a ride. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop us a comment and go work on those motorcycles.